Hello, fellow souls. Today I'm here to start a new series on Ashthavakra Gita, which I'm trying to attempt to make it into a very simplified version of the original ancient classical spiritual text, which is in Sanskrit, which has been brought down to us from the ancient sages. It is a radical scripture of immense intensity, power, and purity. I'm going to try and simplify it which has been translated by several people in English. I'm going to use some of the excerpts from their translations and some of my own interpretations and present it to you in different parts. Today, I'm going to just speak a little bit about the introduction, about what the scripture is about, and a few verses of the first chapter is what I'm going to be dealing with today. So I hope you will enjoy this. I'm going to try and make it as simple as possible. Every word of the script of the spiritual document is capable of producing a deep and profound impact on the listener. The words are packed with so much power that the reader or the listener is automatically impelled to walk the path of self-inquiry. So the beauty of this scripture is that it is continuously has a one-pointed approach. It is relentlessly one-pointed. And it makes it a unique text because of that, as it does not offer any props or footholds. It emphasizes the essential need to rise above all dualities and goes beyond all identifications and conditionings. The power of the words used and the manner in which they have been used by whosoever has put this document together, the scripture together, which is actually a dialogue between two people, makes this text stand out from all other ancient scriptures, because we don't even know who has put this together, but it has just been brought down to us uh, through the ages. So the text of the Ashthavakra Gita is so focused that it leaves little room for any other meaning to be intended into what Ashtavakra was trying to convey. One is only forced to interpret it the way Ashtavakra wanted it to be understood by his listeners or readers. And not many scriptures can make such a claim, because a lot of the other scriptures are so open to interpretation. However, in this case, there is very little room for trying to interpret it in a different way. He's very relentlessly single pointed and just keeps on speaking about one thing only throughout, and in great clarity. The Gita is presented in the form of a dialogue between Ashtavakra, who's the guru, and his disciple, King Janaka, who's the king of Mithila. So, as legend goes, Ashtavakra, although not very clear and well defined, has been assigned some kind of a period after the Bhagavad Gita. So, let me give you a little story behind Ashtavakra's life, just briefly. So, the story goes that Ashtavakra leaves his home in search of his father Kahoda, who has been defeated in Janaka's court in an intellectual duel with Sri Vandin, the court philosopher of Janaka. Kahoda is being held captive due to this defeat. Ashtavakra goes to Mithila and wants to engage this philosopher Sri Vandin in an intellectual contest and defeat him. And manages to do that, and he is able to then liberate his father from the king's captivity. Subsequently, Ashtavakra wins Janaka's deep respect, and the ensuing dialogue between the rishi, who's Ashtavakra, and the king, which is Janaka, takes this wonderfully poetic form, which is the Gita, or the song, the Geet actually. We call it Gita in English, but it's actually Geet in Sanskrit, which is known as the Ashtavakra Gita, which is the song of Ashtavakra. So I'm going to still keep on using the word Gita because that is a little more understood by everybody. So just so that it's clearly understood, I'm going to still continue saying Gita, but it's actually Geet. So Ashtavakra is a man of truth and minces no words. He's he's bluntly outspoken, speaks the truth as it is without any artifice or coloring. He's predominantly concerned with his message rather than its impact, whether the message has a positive or negative impact on the listener. He doesn't bother about that. He is only fixated on conveying the message that he wants to convey. Indeed, he was cursed for this very bluntness even before he was born. So, this is what the background story is. There is a bit of a history to this. The Mahabharata, Book 3, Vanaparva, mentions a learned rishi named Udalaka, who was famous for his knowledge of the Vedas and scriptures. Many students studied under him. One of his disciples was Kahoda, which is Ashtavakra's father, who greatly pleased his guru with his devotion. So Udalaka was highly impressed with Kahoda and gave his daughter Sujata in marriage to Kahoda. After their marriage, the couple continued to reside in Udalaka's hermitage, and Kahoda was assisting his father in law in Vedic teachings. In due course, his wife became pregnant, and she was usually in the habit of sitting near her father and her husband while they were studying the scriptures. And her unborn child attained mastery over the Vedas by just listening to his grandfather expounding on them. Kahoda, who was not as skilled as his guru, made a number of mistakes while reciting the scriptures. Unable to bear these errors, the child started correcting them from his mother's womb. And humiliated before his disciples, Kahoda cursed his son, saying, "As you insulted your father, may you be born with 8 bends in your body." And therefore, Ashtavakra got cursed just before he was born, and accordingly, the child was born with his body bent in 8 places, which is why his name was Ashtavakra, one which has 8 deformations in his body. And this is because he has his nature of being blunt, uncompromising, and upfront remained with him throughout his life and is reflected in these dialogues with Janaka. One can witness during the course of these dialogues how adamant Ashtavakra gets in laying down his thoughts, and you will see that when I proceed with the rest of the verses. He entertains no concepts, rejecting them all. He rejects anything that is perceived through the body, mind, and intellect. And he stresses there is no such thing as existence or non existence, right or wrong, thoughts or emotions, matter or non matter, and moral or immoral value systems. He outrightly rejects the theory of Maya, which is illusion, concepts like personal God or Ishwar, ego, which is the jiva, and even the existence of a universe or jagat. For him, the self beyond all consciousness is the only reality, and this alone is the absolute truth. So, Ashtavakra may come across as someone who rejects all forms of spiritual practice. He completely discounts them as they point to the existence of the doer, which is the ego created identity that we carry with us, which is that I am the doer, and it is based on the ego personality that we create. He dares to reject even the most elevated yoga states of attainment, such as the various samadhis, which people like Pushpanjali and all have spoken about. Absolutely nothing finds any favor with him. But trying to understand Ashtavakra through the medium of the mind is a very dangerous thing to do. That is why I urge you here to just not try to listen to this through the mind, but just try to grasp it through a deeper knowing within you. Absolutely nothing finds any favor with him. But trying to understand Ashtavakra through the mind is a very dangerous thing to do. Ignorance will continue to prevail as it is not backed by any sadhana or practice or actual realization on the part of the sadhaka or the spiritual aspirant. So, I again urge you that if you really wish to understand Ashtavakra in its purest essence, you will have to enter into the depths of meditation, which is dhyan, and make his insights your own personal experience. Failing which, you will only be deluding yourself and will fall prey to lofty but empty words. So, large sections of Ashtavakra's dialogues are also symbolic representations of the various states of consciousness experienced during meditation. Taking them as literal interpretations will defeat the very purpose of these dialogues. So, this is a little request to all the listeners to be able to hear it and not let the mind come in a defensive manner to object to what is being said here and just try to assimilate what you hear. Janaka uvacha katham jnanam vapnoti katham muktir bhavishyati vairagyam cha katham praptam etad bruhi mama prabhu. So the dialogue starts between Janaka and Ashtavakra. And Janaka goes up to, he's very impressed with what Ashtavakra did at his court. And he goes to him and he says, I want to ask you some basic questions. And Janaka says, he wants to know, how is knowledge to be acquired? How is liberation to be attained? And how is detachment to be reached? He asks him, tell me this, my master. Because the goal in life has always been to seek happiness. All of us are always, the one thing that all human beings are searching for is happiness. From time immemorial, we have been trying to find happiness everywhere except within our own selves. And we have failed pathetically in finding it. True and lasting happiness has always eluded everybody. A seeker is witness to the fact that most of his own life and the lives of those around him has been wasted in accumulating wealth, position, and the personal love of family and friends. Yet, despite having all of that, he cannot find lasting happiness in any of these activities. Someone like Janaka, who has everything, he has reached that stage where he wants to know what is true happiness and what is liberation, what is detachment, what is true knowledge. So, just as water quickly slips away from one's palm, so also do the joy and contentment of these achievements, these material achievements, leaving a seeker disillusioned, disheartened, and craving for more. A seeker's thirst for permanent joy and happiness remains unquenched in spite of all material gains. When the seeker further inquires as to why this is so, he finds that the very objects he thought would bring him joy and happiness are the cause of his unhappiness. So, nothing of this world or belonging to this world can ever give permanent happiness. To be really happy, one not only needs freedom from one's dependence on sense objects, but also the ability to remain in one's own sense of I am. Then alone can one have everlasting joy and bliss. It is at this stage, when the futility of material gains is realized, that Janaka puts these three questions to his master, to his teacher, to Ashtavakra. Janaka symbolizes the state of mind of a sadhaka, a spiritual aspirant, like all of us, who is desperate to get these answers from his teacher. Answering such questions is not an easy task, as the seeker is habituated to outwardly indulging in various sense objects. Since these questions were actually posed by Janaka, it gives us reason to believe that he was not fully enlightened as yet, although he was a very advanced sadhaka. There is a terminology which is known as a mumukshu, a person who is a seeker of moksha or liberation. So Janaka could be characterized as one of those. He was not completely entrenched into the material, but he was a seeker who was a spiritual aspirant, a sadhak, who was seeking these answers. And after meeting Ashtavakra, these questions naturally came to him. So here is what Ashtavakra had to say to him. Ashtavakra uvacha Muktim ichhasi chetat Vishayan Vishavatyaja Kshamarjavardyatur Satyam Piyushvada Bhaja. He said, "If you are seeking liberation, my son, look upon sense objects as poison. Practice tolerance, sincerity, compassion, contentment, and truthfulness." So, the Master's advice here is very one pointed and very clear. Sense objects drive our minds outwards, they make us dependent on them. The objects lure the mind and intellect towards them, and the fulfillment of the senses gives the seeker a false sense of satisfaction and joy, albeit of a temporary nature. But soon he will come to know that the ugly fangs of vasanas, or these tendencies, will rise again to torment him. Some or the other desire will again rise within to trouble you. So if he's able to quench his thirst, he will be happy for some time only. But if he's not able to do so, then he will be sorrowful and miserable. That is why the Master advises the seeker to treat objects of the senses like poison. And this is the teaching that Ashthavakra gives to Janaka, that treat the organs, the sense objects as poison. This does not mean that a seeker cannot possess these objects for enjoyment. It is very commonly misunderstood that a spiritual aspirant has to literally renounce the world and all worldly objects if self realization is to be attained. However, this is not a correct understanding. So, what Ashtavakra is saying here is not to renounce the world and leave everything. Physical renunciation is very trivial and, in fact, not even desirable, as it can increase the desire and frustration in an unprepared mind in which the seeds of vasanas remain. One fateful day, the seed will germinate and cause much mental anguish and disturbance in a sadhak's life. Therefore, it is advisable to let the objects have their own place and let them remain where they are. And this is how we need to treat the sensory requirements and the sense objects that we have in our surrounding. The only aim of a sadhak should be to figure out whether these objects are real or mere illusions. When a deep inquiry is made through inner introspection and meditation, it will be known that these objects all disappear when the mind disappears. They have no independent existence of their own, but were just projections of the mind. The strong message here is that a serious sadhak must not pay attention to them and instead must focus and direct his attention within to the source from which everything manifests. So, this is what he's trying to say, that we need to go back within and go to the root cause from where all these desires are manifesting. The source. The virtues listed in this verse: practice tolerance, sincerity, compassion, contentment, truthfulness, are carefully chosen and are essential aids to self realization. So, Ashtavakra says, practice tolerance, sincerity, compassion, contentment, and truthfulness, and these will aid you to reach self realization. Ashtavakra believed that in the contemporary context it was necessary for him to talk on moral virtues. In fact, this is the only verse in the entire dialogue where Ashtavakra speaks on morality. Later, he shuns this as a hindrance. However, in the context of the question, he feels that it is necessary to expound on this as well. There is a valid reason for him to do so. A good teacher on occasion has to descend to the level of the student. Even an advanced student like Janaka operates from a plane of duality and is plagued by questions relating to human relationships and forms of mental reactions. Even in the most advanced state, problems related to personal and professional life and relationships emerge in the mind of a sadhaka. There could be problems relating to one's job, family, friends, health, or financial situation. For that reason, Ashtavakra provides moral injunctions for better outward behavior in order to help the sadhak develop in inner mental strength. He knows that to remove the thorns of sensuality and mental impurity, he will have to use a third thorn, that of moral governance through self discipline. Once this goal is reached, Ashtavakra does not feel the need to impose any moral code on a sadhak who has transcended the relative field of duality and follows the path of virtue spontaneously through his own inner promptings. So this is what these are the two verses. The first one is how is knowledge to be attained, how is liberation to be attained, and how is detachment to be reached. And the answer to that is to seek liberation, look upon sense objects as poison, practice tolerance, sincerity, compassion, contentment, and truthfulness. This is the answer he got. Ashtavakra uvacha na prithvi na jalam na agnirna vayurdhayorna va bhavan esham sakshirmatmanam Chitrupam Vidibhoktaye. Now, further on, he says, also try to understand that you do not consist of any of these elements: the earth, water, fire, air, or even ether. To be liberated, know yourself as consisting of consciousness, the witness of these. So, this is a very brilliant thing that Ashtavakra speaks of in the third verse, which is the response to Janaka's question. He says, the biggest cause of our suffering is the belief that we are this gross body. This gross body is nothing but the five elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. However, it is important to understand that the gross body does not belong to us, but to these five elements. On the predestined date, the five elements will take back what belongs to them, and the body will turn to dust. If we truly own this body, it will remain with us forever. Yet most of us identify with our bodies and engage in various vasanas and pursuits of pleasure to make the body and senses happy, and no attention is paid to the real I, the one who is prior to these five elements. So he's pointing a finger in this direction to understand that there was something which was prior to acquiring these five elements which becomes the body. It is possible through inquiry and meditation to have the knowledge that the one who is prior to these elements, the one who is witness of these elements, is not the gross body. The key word witness is very important here, and that is something which will go on throughout this Ashthavakra Gita. So kindly pay attention to this. To witness is to see, hear, or know by presence and perception what is happening. Through perseverance and dedicated practice, it can be easily realized that pure being is the witness of the gross body. The gross body, with all its activities, can be watched from a distance, and the seeker finds his true center, which is his pure being, without identifying with this or that. Once this is established, which is you're able to find the witness, not just as a mental knowing, but through direct realization, the deep identification with the body of five elements is broken, and the sadhak remains in this blissful state of I am. That I am is not the, the five elements, but what is prior to the five elements. And that is what Ashtavakra here is referring to as the witness, and that is what he's pointing at, that try to identify yourself as the witness and not as the five element of the body. Ashtavakra uvacha यदि देहं पृथक्कृत्य चिति विश्राम्य तिष्ठसि अधुनैव सुखी शान्तो बन्धमुक्तो भविष्यसि. If only you can abide in pure consciousness, the I am, he says, seeing yourself as detached from the body, even this very moment you will become happy, peaceful, and free from bondage. So, this is the fourth verse which Ashthavakra is explaining. Here, the sage declares that the moment you see that you are not this body of five elements, you will at once become happy and joyous. However, one has to actually see that. See that from where? From the witness inside you. Not this, the body is just an outer layer. The witness inside you has to see this. This means actual realization and not just knowing it as a mere mental concept. It means actual first-hand experience. It involves practicing the principles of self-inquiry, which includes sitting for formal meditation. When you realize that your true center is that of a witness of this body, then the identification with the body drops and you at once experience joy and bliss. This joy or bliss is not the result of any effort, but the natural consequence of breaking the false illusion that I am this body. Joy or bliss, our true permanent nature, continuously flows through every part of our being. However, we fail to experience it because it remains hidden by the identification with the body, just as the sun remains hidden by the clouds in the sky. Once the clouds pass, the sun will be visible in all its glory. The trouble with us is that we move with the clouds, the body, the mind, the ego, and fail to focus our gaze steadily on the sun, which is the pure I am. If we one pointedly remain stabilized in our sense of pure I am, then we can always see and experience ourselves as that joy and bliss. So for today, I'm going to just stop here. And just to sum it up, what Ashtavakra here is talking about is he's urging Janaka to identify himself not with the body, the five elements, not with the sense objects, to let go of the sense objects, to let go of the five elements of the body. We are going to give it back to the five elements when we leave from here, and to only identify with the true I am, which is the witness of the body, which is, in other words, pure consciousness. So he says, abide in your pure consciousness self, which is the true self. And that self has no bondage. It is ever so happy and peaceful. It is completely liberated. It doesn't seek liberation. It already is liberated. So once you drop the identification with the ego, the mind created personalities, the body, the five element body, the, the thoughts that you have, the mind, and you are able to distance yourself and go back within yourself and see yourself from the witness inside you, the pure consciousness inside you, then you will realize that this is all not you. It is an outward projection of you, which is not the real you. So it is akin to saying, like the blue sky is pure consciousness, and the clouds and everything else that goes on are your thoughts. But the blue sky behind always stays there and witnesses the clouds coming and going. So the clouds are like our ego personality, our mind with its thoughts, and the blue sky is like the pure consciousness behind, the witness which is watching all of this happening. So Ashtavakra is urging Janaka to be the witness and go into his purest self, his I am, which is pure consciousness, and see everything from that standpoint, and let go of the sense organs, let go of the five element body, and be in that state of pure happiness and peace. And immediately, all forms of bondages are dropped, all detachments are dropped, and you go into the purest self. So, this is what we have for today. I'm going to just stop at these first four verses today because otherwise it will become too daunting, and I will come back again and proceed from here onwards. So, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you again.